Stop, call the fashion police. But seriously, let's not make puns about fashion crimes, but let's have a deep dive into fashion counterfeiting, fashion crimes, and why I think there's much more to think about in relation to fashion and some of the invisible crimes of the fashion industry and the world of Zemiology as a way into thinking about how we can be more curious around questions around true crime, crime and harm. From the outset, one of my favourite things to do is to go shopping. I like having my own style, I get excited by new things, and sometimes I find it really hard not to buy new things I like. Particularly, it's really hard to not buy things I like when every time I go on social media, I see people posting new things, cute fits and hauls. Wandering around the shops is something many of us do just for when we don't really have much else to do or when we have a day off. It can be relaxing and enjoyable. It's a form of leisure. We all know this vibe, right? But as a criminologist whose PhD meant I spent 3 years researching the darker side of fashion, I don't just see the fun and the kind of the chill side of fashion. I also see the crime scene where no one's being arrested, and I'm continually stuck between difficult feelings around knowing there's some problems with the fashion industry and crimes in relation to fashion, but also really liking having new things and buying things and going shopping as a form of leisure activity in my free time. Some of you might have seen the first version of this video. With apologies if you did, I got it all wrong. I filmed in vertical, it was a bit of a mess. So because this is a really important video in terms of both who I am and studying social harm, I've decided to redo it. Now I've learned a couple of lessons, although I've still got a lot to go in terms of making content look good. So I'm the Curious Criminologist. My name is Jo and my day job is working as a university lecturer. That means my time is spent teaching criminology, but also doing research. Don't really feel like I fit in that well in a prestigious university, and therefore I spent many years experimenting with teaching outside of the traditional lecture seminar style which we tend to use at university. But also at the same time I keep thinking we're living in this world which is facing unprecedented challenges and changes, both in terms of what is happening all around us, but also how we learn and where do we go for information. So my dissatisfaction about how sometimes academic talk or academic research can feel a little bit separate from everybody in the real world, and sometimes the writing can feel a bit challenging. But I also know that research and evidence are really important for shaping critical thinking and shaping policy decisions, and for helping us all to understand and navigate the world a little bit better. So all of this shapes my ethos behind the Curious Criminologist and what I aim to achieve from this channel. Before I get into the topic, I want to give you some context in terms of my background as a criminologist. So my first introduction to being a researcher was way back in 2006 when I completed my master's in criminology. I got a job as a research assistant on a project about crime-proofing legislation. Now, this took me to Italy as a researcher where I learned firsthand about the problems of fashion counterfeiting. And so my PhD actually came out as a result of that project because I just felt really unsatisfied with what I was being told about the problem of counterfeiting. One of the biggest unanswered questions I had, and which I couldn't find covered well anywhere in academic research, was why do people buy counterfeit goods? They're told they are bad. So nothing could really answer that beyond some really simplistic and for me really problematic assumptions that the only reason people bought counterfeits was because they're too poor to buy the real thing. And I just wasn't really satisfied with that as an explanation. So I set out to study this, and as a result, very quickly as a young early career researcher, found myself challenging the boundaries of everything I thought I knew about criminology. Fast forward a few years and I now work in a department where we put the study of social harm seriously. The study of social harm is known by some as Zemiology, and that's a particular way of thinking about social harm. And actually, even the undergraduate degree I currently work on is completely informed by this social harm way of thinking. And I'm aiming to introduce some of the things we're learning around social harm research and why I think that's important for people who are interested in criminology, but also people who are interested in understanding crime. Been involved with many research projects over the years. That's been obviously my work on fashion and fashion crimes, counterfeit goods, and people selling counterfeit goods as well. But also I've done research on gambling. I've looked at people who engage in charity tourism and some of the problems around charity tourism. I've looked at women in the criminal justice system, and I've been involved in a range of different research projects, and they've all got their own findings and particular focuses of interest. But there's one common thread which goes through everything what I've been interested in the last 20 years and remains my driving interest. And that's the connections between harm and policy, and particularly how some well-meaning policies might have unintended or harmful consequences. But what matters through all of that is that if we take crime as our starting point, we're missing important questions. And that's why my focus always sits with social harm and not what we legally define as crime. And I'm going to explore that lots more on this channel as well. Let's explore some of this through thinking about why the law misses bigger issues and thinking about the case study of a fake bag. So let's take a fake bag. Here's a handbag. It's not fake, but imagine it's a fake bag. We've all seen fakes being sold. We've all seen fake sunglasses being sold. Some of us might have bought them. From a criminal law perspective, our concern when we're talking about fashion and fashion crimes then is usually around the counterfeit and why we shouldn't be buying a counterfeit, or how do we stop buying counterfeits. And usually our concern sits with the harm which is associated with the financial or reputational harm to the brand which is being copied, or the other crimes which might be associated with it. So this might be money laundering or organised crime. We actually have different laws to manage counterfeiting as a crime problem, and some of them actually have really, really strong powers. In the UK, if we see somebody found guilty of breaching the Trademarks Act, which is the main act used against counterfeit products to protect a trademark of a brand, they could actually be given up to 10 years in prison or an unlimited fine if they're found guilty of counterfeiting. Not only that, if they're then found guilty of a criminal lifestyle offence, of which counterfeiting is one, under the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, anything they own, so their house, their car, their expensive TV, if they can't prove they've bought those items through legitimate means, and by that I mean like their legitimate job, prove that money was from a legitimate or legal source and it's possibly come from the counterfeiting profits, then they can be stripped of those assets. This seems really logical to study if we're doing criminology, right? I want you to park the thought of a fake bag for a moment and let's think about a bag being sold in a regular high street shop or online from your favourite retailer. This is the legal product from a legitimate retailer. There's no crime involved in its sale. We're not questioning anything about its authenticity or the legality in happening in terms of its sale. Imagine you've seen everybody buy this bag on social media. You cannot wait to have the latest design. It's so cool. And you managed to find one. Even better, you bagged yourself a bargain and you've got it coming tomorrow on next day delivery. Bag, back of the wardrobe, maybe you'll stick it on Vinted when you get round to it. You've got this new bag and you're super excited. But unbeknown to you, you don't know the history of this bag. And this bag was one of thousands produced on factory lines to meet demand many thousands of miles away. And the manufacturer kept the factory open late in order to meet this demand. Manufacturers are upping the production rate to meet the crazy demand for this new viral sensation. Your bag, it turns up next day, great, but what your bag can't tell you is that when it was produced in a factory where workers are penalised if they join a union. They're expected to work long hours with really, really low pay and not very good conditions. And actually, there's been suggestions that in the factory owners are ignoring the fact that some of the children working there they've definitely got illegal or fake documents claiming they're an adult when they're not really. They're turning a blind eye to that. The factory recently has an inspection and there were some safety recommendations made as a result of the inspection, but actually nobody's going around and checking that those changes actually got made, because the officials, they've been paid off. What that means for the workers is they continue to work in an unsafe environment. Now, we see lots of examples of this in the fashion industry. So of course, this is a hypothetical scenario here, but it's based on things which have happened. Back to our bag, that soft, that luxurious feeling of our bag. In order to get that, it's made using harsh chemicals. Those chemicals have a really energy intensive process in order to enable this bag to feel so lovely and soft. And actually, some of the factory workers, they've developed this cough as a result of the chemicals they're using to make it so soft. Perhaps more worryingly, there's also a leak somewhere in the factory going into the nearby river, which is just behind, and it's gone from being a brilliant blue to a murky brown grey colour. It's filled with bits of rubbish. It's no longer the haven for wildlife which it used to be. But actually, that river then runs down to the local village. So if we think about the impact of what's happening here in terms of the numbers of victims, so we can think about the direct victims, as in the workers who are being exploited or harmed in the creation of this bag within the factory, we can also think about some of the indirect victims who are impacted as well. So this might be the family of the workers. It might be the people who live downstream from the factory who are no longer able to fish and who no longer have fresh water and have to live with the pollution coming from the factory. The environmental factors which are felt miles away because things being pumped into the air or into the water and going all around far beyond the reach of the factory initially. We have to start then questioning, who do we consider as the offender here? What do we mean by an offender? What is crime? And what and how should we be studying these issues if we want a safer, a fairer and a more just society? I'm going to stop here just to say, of course, not all fashion items are harmful. It's a bit too simplistic to say all fashion is bad. That's not where I'm going with this. But what I want to do is to say that if we take a social harms approach rather than one just thinking about crime, we can unearth significant levels of harm which are happening all around us. And also we can shift the focus from being in an individual committing crime to thinking about the harms or the crimes even of industries and corporations that might be systematically harmful. And this is where the concept of Zemiology comes in as a useful tool we have as criminologists where we could think about things. So Zemiology, at the most simple level, is the study of social harms. It actually set out counter to criminology, aimed to reject the dominance of criminology and the emerging concerns around harm within criminology, to say we need a more interdisciplinary approach to understanding socially harmful issues. We need not to be constrained by the legal definitions of crime. Zemiology also recognised that defining something as a crime and our criminal justice response to that crime can be harmful in itself. Once we could get into the deep dive around Zemiology and all the kind of intricacies of it, what I want to focus on here is how Zemiology, in terms of the study of social harms, has become pretty standard curriculum for criminology degrees. But it's also important in terms of helping us understand things which we might not really think might be of interest to criminology. The work of Zemiologists, but also recognising there's important work from critical criminology and people working on areas such as white-collar crime, corporate crime, which have quite long traditions within criminology, although perhaps it's more on the outside rather than the central main focus. They have all challenged us to think more critically about the law, particularly who makes the law. And this is where we need to think about the concept of power, which is something which I'm going to save for another video to deep dive further in. But we need to question who is making the law, who is the law for, and why are some things considered crime and other things which might be really harmful not considered as crime. At the end of this video, I'm just going to give some curious takeaways. If you're a student here and you're looking to improve your criminology theory essay, don't just take everything at face value and focus on describing it. For example, rather than just describe the problem, describe the law Ask questions about who creates the law and who does it protect. Put on your Curious Criminologist hat to be critical. Is there an alternative perspective you can use to question or to challenge something? Perhaps you might be a decision maker who's trying to find solutions to really, really complex problems. Remember that research can help us here and how we can think about a problem differently. For example, within the area of fashion and fashion crimes and counterfeiting, the focus is often on consumers as the problem in a policy solution. Yet in my research about counterfeit fashion, one of my key findings was that by putting the responsibility on the consumer to not buy fakes because we're going to tell them they're harmful wasn't very effective, because they were dissatisfied that this didn't recognise that they saw the fashion industry itself was something which could be quite harmful. If you're a researcher, remember we have a unique insight into the problems that we have spent many, many years trying to understand and to analyse. But often our findings, they sit behind paywalls, or we focus on sharing knowledge with each other within a small research community. And I think we can think about how we can use spaces like this to bridge some of those gaps or bridge some of those paywalls and be a bit less stale and academic, and think about how we can share our knowledge and all this stuff we have buried away in our archives to help everyone understand things which are going on in the world around us. How do we make difficult ideas and complex ideas more accessible? For everyone else, I want to absolutely make clear that this is not about making you feel bad or feel guilty for what you buy. This is just an example of how research and evidence can help us question what we think we know, and why thinking that it's only things which are defined as criminal or illegal are the problem, and actually why we should be thinking about things which are harmful as well, and how sometimes some things can be really harmful yet not defined as a crime as well, and thinking about all the questions which sit around that as well. Thank you very much for listening to this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. The aim of the Curious Criminologist is to make academic research come together with real world curiosity, and with that, stay curious, stay rogue.